Good evening, everybody. Clerk, Madam Clerk, so are we ready? Are we recording? Great, all right. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. It's Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. City Council of Providence, City Council Committee on Finance. We're going to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Chairman Igliosi.
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Ryan.
Present.
Councilwoman Castillo.
Present.
Councilwoman Anthony.
Present.
Councilman Taylor.
Here.
We have 5 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that we have Councilman Espinal present. We also have Councilman Correa present. We also have Gina Costa, Internal Auditor, present. And we have Ken Cheverini, our City Solicitor, and Jim Lombardi, our Treasurer / Senior Advisor. Okay. And then, of course, we'll also have Chief Clements present, Solicitor Dana present, Mr. Mancini present, and Sarah Silvera present, I believe. So with that said, motion to continue items 1, 2, and 3.
So moved. Second.
Second.
Mr. Chair, can I just make a statement before we start?
Okay, I guess then we'll hold off on the motion first and second. Mr. Cheverini, our City Solicitor, please do so, sir.
Just for the record, Mr. Chairman, pursuant to then Governor Gina Raimondo's Executive Order 20-05, which has been extended several times since the initiation of that order of March of 2020. This meeting is perfectly consistent with that order, whereby the Open Meetings Act has been suspended. The executive order allows state and municipal boards, commissions, and councils such as this to conduct meetings via phone or by video conference. I just wanted to point that out for the record, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Solicitor. I had a motion by the Vice Chair for continues 1, 2, and 3, and a second by Councilwoman Castillo. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record reflect that Deputy Majority Leader Mary Kay Harris is present also. Also, Councilwoman LaFortune is present. Okay. With that, Madam Clerk, item number 4, please.
Communications from Mayor Marco Alorza, dated January 2021, submitting a tentative agreement by and between the City of Providence and the Providence Light Industry Internal Order of Police for the period of July 1, 2019 to June 30th, 2023.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that we also held a public hearing on this matter. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
That is correct.
Thank you very much. With that, I also let the record reflect that Commissioner Parry is present. I just noticed. Okay. Mr. Mancini, would you want to give us a quick synopsis of what's before us on the proposed agreement, or do you want to defer to the Commissioner, the Chief, or the Solicitor? Who best?
No, I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sure my esteemed colleagues.
Madam Clerk, let's swear Mr. Mancini in, and then we can go from there. Okay.
Mr. Mancini, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank
Lawrence J. Mancini, Chief Financial Officer for the City of Providence. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, members of the council. At last we met, we provided you with a in-person testimony associated with a fiscal impact statement that was prepared on February 10th and delivered to you, Mr. Chairman, and members of your committee through the Honorable Clerk's Office. And we gave testimony to that fiscal impact statement along with a fiscal narrative of the details of the contract changes that affected those various components, including wages, health care, and pension contributions. And we supplied the committee with a determination letter from our outside actuary. Mr. Chairman, at this point, if I could just, as a point of clarification, I'd like to amend my testimony from the last meeting. I spoke to your internal auditor following the meeting the next day, and after reviewing my testimony, she had asked the question at some point during the meeting that in the event, positively or otherwise, if a future contract was to go to a lower contribution than the one that has been negotiated at 13.5%, would the savings that we project at $31 million still hold? I absolutely misunderstood the question. The answer to that question is no. If there is a lower pension contribution, that could happen, but I don't think that would be the case. then that 31 million would be adjusted. I did check with the solicitor, and he had provided testimony that same evening that the new baseline for the contract would be the final year of the contribution, which is 13.5%. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you might have added to the record that your understanding of the evergreen provision, but that would be also accurate. That is not to say that a future administration or council might tend to negotiate a different change, but for the record before you and for the contract that's under consideration, the $31 million is the correct projection. The order of this question was, could it change if we lowered it in subsequent contracts? That answer is also in the affirmative. So for the record, Mr. Chairman, I wish to amend my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini. So if a future mayor, wait a second, a future mayor and a future council so chooses to go backwards, that'll be their choice. And that'll be at their peril and the taxpayers' peril. So, Mr. Mancini, why don't you
it was a
synopsis, and then we're going to have the city solicitor. Mr. Mancini?
So, Mr. Chairman, we came before you and we presented to you that there were three overarching criteria that the administration, working collaboratively with the FOP leadership, had sought to accomplish, and I believe we accomplished all three. The overriding provision of the FOP membership and their leadership was that they would be recognized and evaluated for their rank amongst their peer departments in the state of Rhode Island, and I'm sure nearby region, where currently they are in the lowest 25% of that ranking for a capital city police department, a large department that probably handles a significantly greater volume of calls than most other metropolitan area departments. And we brought them, or at least by recognition, this would bring them within the top 25% of that. The solicitor testified, he'll testify again, that we attempted to avoid arbitration, which has costly litigation associated with that. And probably in arbitration, their wage component would have approximated somewhere in the high 2% change, maybe 3%. There might have been some give on healthcare, but there clearly would have been no pension reform or pension changes. And so, Mr. Chairman, last but by no means least, the third most important element of this mutually aligned mission was to have a pension reform that spoke to changing pension contributions. Currently, the FOP membership contribute at the rate of 8% of their pay. By the time this contract completes, it'll be at 13.5% with incremental changes in years 1 through year 4. And that will have a $31 million savings on the pension unfunded liability, which today has a $17 million present value. If measured in today's dollars, that's the change that we would be saving in today's dollars. There was a shift of healthcare costs, lessening the expense to the administration and the city as a city government, more of that being picked up by the FOP membership, and that's heralded as a change as well. And we do think, Mr. Chairman, that these changes would be, as they are both historic and unprecedented, would now become the template for future contract negotiations with other bargaining units as those contracts expire. And that would include fire in June 30 of 22 and La Una Local 1033 as well as in June 30 of 22. The total cost of this contract over the 4-year period, Mr. Chairman, is $12,113,028, which averages out to $3 million per year, with the final year costing $3.9 million. An important point, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, to consider is that all during these negotiations, we had negotiated in good faith, and the pension contribution assumed rate of return had held at 8%. In the latter part of this year, with conversation both on the part of the administration, this body, this finance committee, your internal auditor and treasurer, we raised the specter of whether or not 8% was a fair number that we could achieve. Our actuary, doing their work, made the recommendation that it would more likely should be 7%. The administration has embraced that. That matter is now before the city's retirement board. It was there in the February meeting. It's expected to be viewed again at the March meeting. It was continued for further discussion by the membership of the retirement board to digest that. But that change is significant in many ways. It's significant because our actuary has recommended it, but it also has a significant impact to the unfunded liability. Nonetheless, in prudence, we decided that it was wise to do so, particularly given any year that we could not achieve a 7% return on our investment portfolio. And I believe, Mr. Chairman, you will be acquainted with that as you serve on both the retirement board and the board of investment commissioners. So we did that. But I will tell you that had that change not occurred, had it held at 8% for whatever the reason, it's important to note that the cost of the contract would have been considerably less because we would have had that lesser expense at 8%. The contract would have come in at 10.6 million or average of 2.6 million. Why did it take us this long to negotiate the contract? We began in earnest, Mr. Chairman, when the contract expired at June 30th, 2019, and worked through the summer and the fall of 2019. As we approached the early winter and spring of 2020, we were getting closer to negotiations in mindset. And then the COVID-19 pandemic occurred. And with the closure of federal, state, and local government, out of respect to first responders, out of respect to the negotiators, we voluntarily mutually agreed that we would put those negotiations on hold and return to the bargaining table at a time more appropriate. Well, all during the height of COVID-19 pandemic through the spring, summer, and early fall, we did just that. Late in the fall, early winter, we returned to the bargaining table in November and December with vibrancy, and we had commitment to the process, and we did that. We completed it in December and brought it before the executive board of the FOP. They brought it before their membership, who ratified it nearly overwhelmingly, and now it's before the city council and this honorable finance committee. So, Mr. Chairman, it's not that there was a delay that was intentional. There was a delay that, in fact, was caused by the interruption of the COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini. So let's go on to the city solicitor to tell us his position and his position on to support, not support, et cetera, and then we'll go to Commissioner Parry. Solicitor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. So I think that Chief Financial Officer Mancini and the written fiscal impact statement that has been provided to the committee are very thorough summaries of the contract and the terms. So I'm not gonna go back over that. I will echo what Mr. Mancini said about the lengthy nature of the contract negotiation. Add that, and I think part of that is because the city was so resolute on following through on our demand that the contract includes substantial pension reform, which was a very, what we were demanding was very unique among historical contract negotiations with the city's union. I do want to give a lot of credit to the members of the negotiating team for both the city and FOP for sticking through very lengthy and sometimes arduous negotiations to get to this final product. Otherwise, the only thing that I'd like to add to the committee, based on comments that were made at past meetings of this committee and some questions I've received subsequent to that from members of your body, Mr. Chairman, is that it's important to note that the city was not going there in no way, shape, or form would the city be able to avoid paying raises to FOP. That's not an option. It would not be possible for us to do so. We either reach an agreement with FOP or we go to arbitration. And as Mr. Mancini alluded to, arbitration can be a lengthy, costly process. So it's helpful to avoid that if possible. And if we did go to arbitration, there is absolutely zero precedent to suggest that an arbitrator would order the sides to reach agreement on a contract that didn't involve pay raises. While the pay raises may well have been, again, based on precedent, somewhat smaller than those that we agreed to in this contract, the actual total fiscal cost of the city would likely be larger because there's no precedent for an arbitrator requiring that the parties agree to the kind of pension reform we've agreed to. In addition to the health insurance reform, I think so much focus has been paid, rightly so, to the pension reform because of how substantial it is. But the members of the FOP bargaining unit are also going to be contributing more towards their health insurance costs than other employees in the city once this contract gets ratified, if it does. So the fiscal benefits to the city of this contract are very substantial, and at least in our estimation, outweigh the increased raises that we agreed to that may be above and beyond what an arbitrator would order. So I just want to make that clear, what the alternative is to ratifying this contract would be go to arbitration, and we'd have to go with our eyes wide open and understand that there is no precedent for an arbitrator in Rhode Island to order parties to agree to a contract that doesn't involve a pay raise of some sort.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. So is, at this time, the proposed tentative agreement that the administration is proposing, have you guys, you talked about the negotiation portion, now let's talk about the form and the legally sound aspect of it. Is this a legally sound document at this time, and is it prepared correctly and accordingly?
Yes, it's been thoroughly reviewed and drafted, and in particular, I would give all the credit to Deputy City Solicitor Ken Cheverini, who has gone over with a very fine-tooth comb, and we are very comfortable with the draftsmanship of this contract.
Thank you, City Solicitor, and of course, thank Mr. Cheverini.
Can I just make two comments? One to echo what Jeff had said, and then one on the document.
Yes,
first, Jeff is absolutely correct. Jeff and I did look at the last 3 interest arbitration awards, and Jeff's right on. There are there are less modest increases for pay raises, but I can tell you in the last 3 interest arbitration awards, 0 pension changes, and that includes language changes, healthcare pension changes for retirees, or anything relative to the contribution. So 0 changes in the last 3 times we went to arbitration. And then secondly, I've been working with the attorney for the FOP. We are about, we need to review it one more time, but we will have a full red line version of the contract tomorrow or the next day for the full council to review, to see the changes from the TA to the current version. So that will be in the next day or 2. We'll get it to the city clerk and he will provide that to the full council.
So then, Mr. Cheverini, so then we'll have the actual full CBA with the a clean version and a red line version where you had to make the changes?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Perry, I see you. Sir, what is your position on this proposal, and what's your, you have the mic.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I won't reiterate what's been said by many, but for a couple reasons, I fully support and endorse this tentative agreement that's before you. I ask the members of the Finance Committee to reflect and vote in support of it for a couple of reasons. For the city, first and foremost, in pension reform, unprecedented. Some salary increases out of fairness. And when you look at comps, police departments across this, where the Providence police fell, and operationally as well, some language that we haven't spoken about, but that's in there that helps operationally the Providence Police Department. You know, we got criticized and understandably length of time it took for the negotiations to come to, and it wasn't for lack of effort. You know, there's a lot in a CBA.
Mr. Chairman, we're getting every third word. It's hard to understand his testimony.
I'm sorry. Is it better now if I hold it closer?
Perhaps, sir, but we basically the last few moments of your testimony, we weren't getting complete sentences. Could you kindly just back up? I think it's important for the committee to hear what you have to say.
I will. And
thank you, sir.
Sorry about that. I'm on a mobile and I couldn't get to the laptop. So let me back up a little bit. I was saying it's a good contract for your consideration. for a couple of reasons. Not only the financial pension reform that's before you, the salaries that we looked at as comps comparable to other police departments in this state. And it addresses some of that inequity, and also operationally, it changes some of our procedure that we were under contract with and makes us more efficient as a police department. For those reasons, and I was addressing the length of time in which we've both negotiated and came to a temporary agreement with the FOP. It wasn't for the lack of interest or trying or things that, we didn't have control over, which was the pandemic that, set forth a delay in in-person negotiations for the right reasons, and then resuming when we could remotely. So I applaud the FOP and their leadership and the E-Board, their counsel, Joe Pezza, the president, Iamundi, and of course, everyone on the administration side. We put a lot of time and effort in negotiating what I believe is a real good contract, both for the city financially, for the police department, and also operationally for this police department. So I'd ask that you consider all of that and support this tentative agreement that's before you. Thank you. I don't have anything further.
Oh, Chief Clements? Thank you, Commissioner. And Chief Clements, you have the mic, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow council members. I won't reiterate as well what the CFO testified to and the solicitor, but I will say this reflects a long, productive negotiation with the administration, and I commend them and the FOP. And from a high level, it addresses many things. I've been around a long time, but I'll say this is probably one of, if not the best negotiations and agreements I've seen in certainly in my career with the Providence Police Department and other departments in the city. It addresses a host of things that are financially sound and structurally sound for the city. It addresses pension reform immediate impact. It addresses pension reform long-term impact, which is important. As well, it addresses wages and benefit negotiations that went back and forth, and it moves the Providence Police into a higher tier. We were sitting at a very low tier in the state of Rhode Island. And I would say, I'm proud of the work of the men and women of the Providence Police Department. And it was wrong where we sat in that structure. But, we were behind a couple of years in a contract for the type, the scope, and the volume of work that, and the challenging, different type of work that the members of this department are asked to serve this community. It puts them in a higher tier throughout the state. But as well, this contract addressed so many things that reflect a positive step going forward for all. And I strongly urge passage, and I endorse from my end.
Thank you, Chief. Comments or questions by committee members?
Mr. Chair,
Vice Chair?
I'm pleased with the work that has been done. I applaud the administration, the solicitor's office, our own legal on the finance committee, Kenny Cheverini, for their diligent review of this agreement. And I'm just very pleased that we were able to come to this agreement. And I agree with all the comments that were made. It is financially prudent. It is structurally sound. It makes good sense. And I'm happy to see the movement in the wage category to get our police force up, raised, if you will, a little higher, being at the bottom of the New England pay scales is certainly not appropriate nor prudent for long-term planning for your human resources, if you will. Retention of trained officers is very, very important, and making sure our pay scales are in the right place helps with recruiting and retention. So happy to see that. Most importantly, I'm happy to see that there is meaningful pension reform, and that is good to see. The Finance Committee, I think our chairman has led the charge on requesting pension reform in every contract that we negotiate. So I think in that regard, I'm pleased to see the work that has been done and the collaborative nature of your discussions. It's too bad that it's taken so long to get where we're at, but I do recognize that the pandemic has challenged us all time, and good job is what I have to say.
Thank you, Vice Chair and Majority Leader. Councilwoman Anthony.
Yes, I'd just like to say that while I don't object to this contract for all the reasons that have been stated, specifically, that I do believe that that our police officers do deserve to be paid at a rate that's fair and comparable to other cities of similar size and composition of Providence.
Councilwoman Anthony?
Yeah.
Councilwoman, you're cutting out just a little.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I just want to let you know, that's better. You were just cutting out. I didn't want.
Thank you.
I didn't want you to continue and then,
So
I don't want to make the same mistake.
Thank you. So the other reasons I support it is that, it seems to me that most of the increase in the pay is going to be used for contributions to OPEB, health insurance, and of course the pension contribution. And I do agree that we are in desperate need of pension reform, and I'm thrilled that this seems to be the first contract that's come forth that has, an increase in employee contributions, because we desperately need that. We need that to be repeated in all of our contracts. We're facing a $1 billion unfunded pension liability, and we need to use every tool that we have. So I think it's a huge plus. The issue for me is that it almost seems that we're putting the cart before the horse. We have been listening to hours of testimony from many of our constituents, regarding police reform. And so I hope that we are going to hear from the city what it has done and what it is planning to do to address that very issue. What are we doing in terms of the way we police our residents? We have a lot of things that need to be done. I appreciate the fact that our Major Clements is certainly working on some of these issues and have been, but we have to respond to our constituents to let them know what it is we are going to do and that we have been listening to their concerns. So I just wanted to say that, and I look forward to a continuing conversation on police reform. Thank you.
Councilman Anthony, I will, after we get past the contract and the budget, we'll bring back the police department, of course, which we plan on doing. As you know, we've had them several times bringing forward all the diversionary programs. So we'll bring them back to have that continuing conversation. It's a valid question. It's an important question. So we'll do our diligence on our part to arrange that to happen. Thank you. Any committee members? Council members, do you have any questions or comments? Okay. Internal order, do you have any comments or questions?
I'm sorry. I think we have Councilwoman LaFortune who's trying to speak.
No, I don't. If she wants to raise her hand, she can. Do you want to raise your hand? Do you want to speak, Councilwoman LaFortune?
Yeah, I did have my hand raised, but then I'm sorry. Thank you, Councilwoman Anthony. I actually did have it raised, but Councilwoman Anthony, the question I wanted to ask around police.
Hang on a second, Councilwoman LaFortune, hang on a second. Madam Clerk, Mr. Clerk, was her hand raised? Because I want to make sure we're getting on our end.
No, she was saying that she raised it and took it down.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure. Okay. I didn't want to make sure we didn't miss anybody. I'm sorry. Councilwoman LaFortune, you have the mic.
No, she was saying she raised it and then she.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. You all set, Councilwoman LaFortune?
Yes, what I was saying was that I did raise my hand, but Councilwoman Anthony had asked the question around police reform that I wanted to ask. So I didn't want to repeat the same questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much. So any other further comments or questions? Then do we have entertain a motion to recommend approval to the full council?
Motion to recommend approval to the full council.
A motion by Vice Chair, do I have a second?
Second.
Councilman Taylor, discussion? I just want to say a couple of things real quick. And this particular term, actually the past 3 or 4 years, I guess, I haven't seen too many contracts that I've liked. In fact, I haven't voted for many. I didn't vote for the fire contract nor the teacher's contract, because one of the biggest issues was there was no pension reform in the fire contract, and there was no teacher reform in the teacher's contract. And both of those contracts have cost us dearly. I'm really pleased to see that this particular police contract contains, as mentioned, healthcare reform, pension reform, which is great. It begins and starts the new clock on how we need to handle the situation. We're all in the same boat. The pension liability, unfunded liability is a real situation. It does have a massive cost on the taxpayer and all the city of Providence. It's a drain on our ability to do other programs and other expansions of positive things in the city. So I'm excited the fact that this is setting a precedent and setting a tone for the next fire contract, hopefully for the next 1033 contract, and also help the future councils and the future mayors with moving that bar up higher. Also, I'm very pleased. Actually, I started my career advocating for a police academy and increasing the police force way back when, with 5+ mayors ago. And I'm actually pleased to see there's also a police academy, continuing the police academy process in it. So I'm very excited about that. I do want to mention one thing. I know this past year or so has been very trying. There has been ups and downs dealing with policing in the city of Providence, and ups and downs across the country. But I'm going to talk about Providence proper and what I know. I did hear numerous hours of a public hearing, you're right. But I also did hear numerous hours of one-on-one with my constituents who actually live in my neighborhood. And I want to say to the chief and the commissioner that my constituents have overwhelmingly said to me, they believe the police are doing a good job. They want more policing. They want more community policing. And of course, they understand anybody who's not doing a good job as a police officer, they want an expedited process. Of course, if there's a way to amend or to overturn a policeman's Bill of Rights in some form or fashion, so it makes it easier for the police administration to remove and to address officers who are not acting in the best interests of our constituents, we urge you to do everything you can to fight that fight. My constituents support that fight and support that. But they also support, overwhelmingly, they want quality life issues. They want to be able to live in their homes, be able to raise their children in their homes. They want to be able to go to work in their homes. And part of that quality of life element is having a good, solid police force. And we do. The Providence Police Force, and I'm speaking once again, fortunately and unfortunately for others, I've been here on my 3rd decade now, and the Providence Police Department has come miles and miles of moving forward in a positive direction, reforming itself, addressing issues, and it starts from the leadership. And I have to give compliments to Chief Clements and Commissioner Perry, because it's important. People see it, they see what you're out there trying, they see that you don't tolerate bad behavior, and no one does. I haven't met one constituent who says, I support police brutality. No one does. And I haven't met one police officer, at least in my tenure, who says, I support police brutality. But there are people who take liberties when they put that badge on. And whatever we can do to support you as an administration to help address those situations, I want to know that I'm there with you. But it's also important to treat our employees. And police officers are the employees of the city of Providence. And just like anything else, a company is judged by how they treat their employees. And we have a lot of good people work for the city, both in fire, 1033, teachers, and et cetera, and the police department. And contracts is a signal on how we want to have a good working positive relationship with our employees. And it seems to me this contract says that. Here is a group of employees that chose to step up, willing to help with the pension issue, willing to help with the healthcare issue, willing to understand to move forward in a positive direction. And I just want to say that is important to recognize, because this negotiations the administration conducted with Mr. Cheverini, the Solicitor Dana, Mr. Chief, and the Commissioner, et cetera, it was not a one-sided, it was a collaborative effort. And that is a positive step. That shows that our police department and our men and women who wear their blue are willing to work with us to make the department a better place for everybody. And I compliment not only the administration, but I compliment the rank and file police officer and the FOP. Because guess what? They didn't have to do anything. They could have sat back. They could have just wrote it out. They got the evergreen law and just say, you know what? We'll just keep pushing. We'll just wait and wait. And so it takes two in a marriage, and it takes two together and to make a good marriage. And it looks like this is hopefully a continuation of a good marriage between our rank and file and our administration. So I want to thank all the parties. And on behalf of my constituents, I want to thank the chief and the commissioner, solicitor, and everybody involved in the administration, because they have said they like what's happening. They say they like the positive movements at the police department, and they like the leadership of Chief Clemens. So I want to thank you. I'm supporting this. I will support this. But just like if there's someone who's not doing the job right, I expect everybody to stand up and do the right thing and extricate that individuals who aren't. And I know there has been no evidence that's presented to me by the commissioner or the chief or the solicitor that has shown that they tolerate any of that type of behavior. So I commend you for that leadership, and I commend the administration for this. So with that, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. With that said, there's no other business between the.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Adjourned
Second.
by.
Second.
Second by Council Castillo. Discussion. Thank you all. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.